The taste of copper still lingers on my tongue whenever I think of that night. Blood has a way of marking you, doesn't it? Like a stain that never quite washes out, no matter how hard you scrub. My name is Juliet Blackwood, and I died at 16. What came back 10 years later wasn't the same girl who tried to tell the truth. What came back was something else entirely. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but they're wrong. It's best served burning hot, when the flames are high enough to consume everything in their path. Before I continue with my story, if you love listening to revenge stories, please subscribe to our channel for more daily revenge stories. Like this video and don't forget to share to your loved ones. Enjoy listening. I remember the exact moment my childhood ended. It was a Tuesday evening in October, rain drumming against the windows of our estate like impatient fingers. I'd found the photographs hidden in Father's study, pictures that made my stomach turn, documents that spelled out corruption, so deep it went to the very core of our family's fortune. At 16, I thought truth was a shield that would protect me. I thought justice was something that actually existed. How beautifully naive I was. I'd gathered my courage like armor, clutching those damning papers as I walked into the dining room where my family sat around our mahogany table. Mother was wearing her pearls, the ones that caught the light just so. My brother Marcus was texting someone under the table, his usual smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. And Father was cutting his steak with surgical precision, every movement calculated and controlled. "I know what you've been doing," I said, my voice barely above a whisper but somehow filling the entire room. The silence that followed was deafening. Mother's fork clattered against her plate. Marcus finally looked up from his phone. And Father just kept cutting his steak, each slice deliberate and measured. "Juliet, darling," Mother said, her voice honey-sweet with its familiar warning edge. "What on earth are you talking about?" I spread the photographs across the table like playing cards. Pictures of meetings that should never have happened. Handwritten notes in Father's distinct script. Bank statements that painted a picture of embezzlement and worse. So much worse. "The children," I whispered, pointing to one particular photograph. "The ones who disappeared from the orphanage. The ones you." The backhand came so fast I didn't see it coming. One moment I was standing, the next I was on the floor, my cheek burning and my mouth full of blood. The copper taste that would haunt me for the next decade. "Hysterical," Father said, his voice calm as if he were discussing the weather. "She's become completely hysterical." Within an hour, Dr. Ashworth arrived. I'd met him before at family gatherings, a thin man with kind eyes who'd always seemed so gentle. But the eyes that looked at me that night were different. Cold. Calculating. The same way Father looked at his business ledgers. "Acute hysteria," he pronounced after a 5-minute examination that consisted mainly of Father whispering in his ear. "Delusional episodes. Dangerous fantasies. She needs immediate institutionalization." I screamed. I fought. I begged. But who listens to a hysterical 16-year-old girl when wealthy men are speaking? Thornfield Psychiatric Hospital sat on the outskirts of the city like a gray cancer against the landscape. It was the kind of place where screams got swallowed by thick walls and hope went to die. For the first year, I kept believing someone would come for me. That someone would investigate. That someone would care. No one did. The treatment started immediately. Therapeutic intervention, they called it. Electric shocks that made my teeth rattle and my memories blur. Medications that turned my thoughts to sludge and my days to endless gray fog. Ice baths that left me shivering for hours, watching my lips turn blue while attendants made notes on their clipboards. "This is for your own good, Juliet," Dr. Ashworth would say during our sessions, his pen scratching across paper as he documented my progress. "Your family loves you very much. That's why you're here." Love. They called it love. I learned to lie. Survival in that place meant becoming an actress, and I discovered I had a talent for it. I learned to nod at the right moments, to express gratitude for my treatment, to speak in soft, measured tones that convinced them I was getting better. All while inside, something else was growing. Something dark and patient and hungry. The first 5 years were the hardest. My body adapted to the medications. My mind learned to compartmentalize the pain. I started keeping a journal hidden in my mattress, writing down every detail I could remember about that night, about the photographs, about the truth that had landed me in this hell. The nurses thought I was writing poetry. In a way, I suppose I was. By year 7, I'd earned enough trust to work in the hospital library. It was there I began my real education. Law books, business journals, psychology texts. I devoured them all. I learned about corporate structures, about legal loopholes, about the human mind, and how to manipulate it. I learned about my family's business empire, reading about their charitable donations and civic awards in magazines that painted them as pillars of the community. It was also in the library that I met her. Elena Vasquez, a night shift nurse who'd been working at Thornfield for 3 years. She had kind eyes, truly kind, not the fake kindness of the doctors, and she was the first person in 7 years to ask me what I thought about something. "You're different from the others," she said one evening as I was reshelving books. "You don't belong here, do you?" I almost laughed. After 7 years of being told I was crazy, someone finally saw what I'd been trying to prove all along. Elena became my lifeline. She brought me books from the outside, helped me access newspaper archives, and most importantly, she listened. Really listened. When I told her about the photographs, about my father's crimes, she didn't dismiss me as delusional. She saw the truth in my eyes. "I believe you," she said one night, and those 3 words were the first honest thing anyone had said to me in years. It took 2 more years to plan. 2 years of careful preparation, of forging documents, of Elena slowly documenting the abuse happening at Thornfield. 2 years of learning to be someone else, someone who could walk in the world again without the stain of mental illness following her. The night of my escape, Elena handed me a manila envelope. Inside were documents that would change everything. A forged certificate of mental competency, a death certificate for Juliet Blackwood, and a birth certificate for Julia Blackwell, close enough to my real name to feel authentic, different enough to create a new identity. "There's money too," Elena said, pressing a bundle of cash into my hands. "I've been saving. It's not much, but it's enough to get you started." I wanted to ask her why she was helping me. Why she was risking everything for a patient everyone else believed was insane. But I already knew the answer. She'd seen the same thing I had, the truth that powerful people will do anything to bury. "I'll expose what's happening here," I promised her. "What they did to me, what they're doing to others." Elena shook her head. "Be careful, Juliet. Some truths are too dangerous to tell." She was right, of course. But she was also wrong. Some truths are too dangerous not to tell. I walked out of Thornfield on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 10 years after I'd been committed. The same rain was falling, the same gray sky stretching endlessly overhead. But I wasn't the same girl who'd entered those doors. That girl had died somewhere between the 3rd electric shock treatment and the 100th injection. What emerged was something harder, sharper, infinitely more dangerous. Julia Blackwell was born that day. She had money, not much, but enough. She had an education cobbled together from years of reading and observation. And she had something more valuable than either. She had purpose. The first phase of my plan was simple: disappear completely. I moved to Chicago, got a job at a small investment firm, and began building a new life. I was careful, methodical, patient. I learned to speak differently, to carry myself with the confidence of someone who'd never been broken. I colored my hair darker, wore contact lenses to change my eye color, and practiced smiling in the mirror until it looked natural. For 3 years, I was nobody. Just another face in the crowd, another worker bee in the corporate hive. But every night I studied. I learned about my family's business empire, about their investments, their weaknesses, their secrets. I tracked their movements, their habits, their vulnerabilities. I became an expert on the Blackwood family in ways they could never imagine. The second phase began when I engineered my return to their world. Not as Juliet. She was dead and buried. But as Julia Blackwell, a successful investment advisor with an impressive track record and impeccable credentials. All forged, of course, but convincing enough to pass scrutiny. I remember the moment I first saw Father again. He was giving a speech at a charity gala, talking about his commitment to helping troubled youth. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He looked older, grayer, but still carried himself with that same arrogant confidence that had haunted my nightmares. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? The broken girl he'd had committed was gone, replaced by a poised woman in an expensive dress who knew exactly how to play the game. "Mr. Blackwood," I said, approaching him after his speech. "Julia Blackwell. I've been following your work for years." He smiled that politician's smile, the one that never reached his eyes. "Miss Blackwell, how wonderful to meet you." If only he knew. I spent months building relationships, earning trust, becoming invaluable to the family's business interests. I was charming, efficient, discreet, everything they valued in an employee. I attended their parties, laughed at their jokes, and slowly, carefully, began to insert myself into their lives. Mother was the first to warm to me. She was lonely, I realized, trapped in a marriage to a monster she'd chosen to ignore. She invited me to lunch, to gallery openings, to charity events. I became her confidant, her advisor, her friend. She told me things about the family, about their history, about secrets she'd kept buried for decades. Marcus was different. He was suspicious by nature, always watching, always questioning. But he had weaknesses too. A gambling problem he thought he'd hidden. A drinking habit that was getting worse. Affairs that could destroy his marriage. I cataloged them all, every vulnerability, every pressure point. And Father was the challenge. He was careful, controlled, paranoid about security. But he was also getting older, and with age came carelessness. He started forgetting things, making mistakes, letting his guard down in ways he never would have when he was younger. It was during one of our business meetings that I noticed his pills. Heart medication, prescribed by Dr. Ashworth, the same doctor who'd had me committed. The same doctor who'd rubber-stamped my imprisonment based on a 5-minute examination and a wealthy man's word. That's when the third phase began. Replacing Father's medication was almost insultingly easy. Placebos that looked identical to his heart pills switched out during one of my visits to the house. I watched over the following weeks as he began to deteriorate. The chest pains, the shortness of breath, the fatigue that made him snap at everyone around him. Mother was worried, begging him to see a doctor, but Father was too proud, too stubborn. "It's just stress," he'd say, loosening his tie. "The business has been demanding lately." If only he knew how demanding it was about to become. Dr. Ashworth was easier than I'd expected. He was older now, lonelier, still unmarried and increasingly isolated. I'd done my research. He had a weakness for younger women, a pattern of inappropriate relationships that he'd managed to keep hidden through careful manipulation and strategic payoffs. I became Julia Blackwell, recent divorcee, vulnerable and seeking guidance. I scheduled appointments for anxiety, played the role of the damaged woman who needed his help. He was attracted to broken things, I realized. It made him feel powerful, necessary. "You remind me of someone," he said during one of our sessions. "A patient I treated years ago. A troubled young woman from a prominent family." I let my eyes fill with tears. "I hope you were able to help her." "I tried," he said, his voice heavy with what I supposed was meant to be regret. "But some people are beyond help. Some people are simply too damaged to function in society." The rage that filled me in that moment was white-hot, pure, and perfect. But I kept it hidden, buried beneath layers of careful performance. "That must have been difficult for you," I said softly. "Making that decision." "It was," he agreed. "But sometimes for the greater good, difficult decisions must be made." The greater good. As if destroying a 16-year-old girl's life was somehow noble. I seduced him slowly, carefully, over the course of several months. I let him believe he was healing me, that his attention was making me whole. I played the grateful patient, the woman who saw him as her savior. And when he finally crossed the line, When he made his move during what should have been a professional session, I had him exactly where I wanted him. The recording was crystal clear. His voice, unmistakably propositioning his patient, using his position of authority to manipulate someone he believed to be vulnerable. I had photographs too, taken during our encounters, showing him in compromising positions that would destroy his reputation and his career. "Dr. Ashworth," I said, my voice no longer soft and vulnerable but sharp as a blade. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." The look of confusion on his face was almost comical. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "My name isn't Julia Blackwell," I said, watching his face carefully. "It's Juliet Blackwood. Remember me? The hysterical 16-year-old you had committed based on a 5-minute examination." The color drained from his face. His hands started shaking. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Juliet Blackwood is dead. She died in the hospital 5 years ago." "Did she?" I smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Or did you just stop caring enough to check?" I showed him the recordings, the photographs, the evidence I'd gathered. I watched as his world crumbled before his eyes, just as mine had crumbled 16 years earlier. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Justice," I said simply. "You took 10 years of my life. Now I'm going to take yours." The commitment papers were surprisingly easy to forge. After all, I'd had years to study the system, to understand how it worked. Dr. Ashworth was declared mentally unstable, a danger to himself and others. The evidence was overwhelming. The inappropriate relationships, the abuse of power, the clear signs of deteriorating mental health. He was committed to Thornfield Psychiatric Hospital, the same facility where I'd been imprisoned for 10 years. I made sure he was placed in the same wing, given the same treatments, subjected to the same therapeutic interventions that had nearly destroyed me. I visited him once, about a month after his commitment. He was different, smaller, broken, with the same hollow look I'd seen in the mirror for years. The medications had taken their toll, just as they'd taken their toll on me. "Do you remember what you told me?" I asked, sitting across from him in the same visiting room where I'd begged my family to listen to me. "You said some people are too damaged to function in society. Some people are beyond help." He stared at me with empty eyes, drool collecting at the corner of his mouth. "I wonder," I continued, "if you still believe that." He didn't answer. I'm not sure he could. The final phase began on a Tuesday in October, exactly 17 years after that first Tuesday that had changed everything. Father's condition had worsened significantly. The lack of proper medication had taken its toll, and he was having frequent chest pains, dizzy spells, episodes where he'd forget where he was or what he was doing. But he was still functional enough for what I had planned. The gala was Mother's idea, a celebration of Father's 70th birthday and 40 years of service to the community. The guest list was impressive. Politicians, business leaders, society figures, all the people who'd benefited from the Blackwood family's largesse over the years. All the people who'd turned a blind eye to the truth. I helped plan every detail. The venue, our family estate, the same place where I'd been beaten and dragged away. The guest list, carefully curated to include everyone who mattered. The entertainment, a string quartet, just like the one that had played at family dinners when I was a child. And the special surprise I'd planned for the evening's end. I spent weeks preparing the audio files. Hours of Father's voice, recorded during our business meetings over the past year. I'd been careful, patient, drawing out conversations about the past, about business deals, about decisions that had been made. He'd been surprisingly talkative, perhaps because he was getting older, perhaps because he trusted Julia Blackwell in ways he'd never trusted his own daughter. The recordings were damning. Confessions to embezzlement, to bribery, to the trafficking operation that had cost children their lives. His voice, clear and unmistakable, admitting to crimes that would have sent him to prison for life. The night of the gala, I wore red. It seemed appropriate. The evening began perfectly. Father was in good spirits, despite his recent health problems. He gave a touching speech about family, about legacy, about the importance of protecting the people you love. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mother was radiant, playing the perfect hostess. She'd grown to trust me so completely that she'd put me in charge of the evening's technical arrangements. The sound system, the lighting, the security cameras that would record everything for posterity. Marcus was drunk, as usual. He'd been drinking more heavily lately, especially after his wife had filed for divorce. Apparently, she'd discovered his affairs. I wondered who might have sent her the photographs. As the evening progressed, I found myself thinking about Elena, about the nurse who'd helped me escape. She'd been right about dangerous truths, but she'd also been wrong. Some truths are too dangerous to remain buried. At precisely 11 o'clock, as the guests were enjoying dessert and Father was basking in their adulation, I activated the sound system. Father's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. The first recording was relatively mild, just some casual admission of bribing a city official. But as the night progressed, the admissions became more serious, more damning. The reaction was immediate. Conversations stopped. People looked around, confused, trying to understand what they were hearing. Father's face went white, then red, then white again. "Turn it off," he whispered to me. "Julia, turn it off." But I wasn't Julia anymore. I was Juliet Blackwood, the girl who'd tried to tell the truth 17 years ago. The girl who'd been silenced, drugged, tortured, and left to die in a psychiatric hospital. "I can't do that," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "You see, everyone deserves to know the truth." The recordings continued. Father's voice describing the trafficking operation, the children who'd been sold, the officials who'd been bought. The guests were horrified, some trying to leave, others standing frozen in shock. But the doors were already locked. I'd seen to that. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, standing up and addressing the room. "I'd like to introduce myself properly. My name is Juliet Blackwood. I was 16 years old when I discovered evidence of my father's crimes. I tried to tell the truth, to expose what he was doing. For that, I was declared insane and locked away for 10 years. The room was silent except for Father's voice continuing to play, describing horrors that made several guests physically ill. "You all knew," I continued, my voice steady and clear. "Maybe not the details, but you knew something was wrong. You knew the Blackwood fortune was built on blood and suffering. But you didn't care, because you benefited from it. Your campaigns, your charities, your social causes, all funded by the sale of children." Mother was crying now, her perfect makeup ruined by tears. Marcus was trying to break down one of the doors, his face red with panic and exertion. "Julia," Father said, his voice weak. "Please. I'm your father." "My father died 17 years ago," I replied. "He died when he chose to protect his empire instead of his daughter. When he chose to silence the truth instead of confronting it." I pulled out a small device, a timer, connected to the house's gas system. I'd spent months learning about the estate's infrastructure, about its vulnerabilities. Amazing what you can accomplish when you have access and people trust you. "What are you doing?" Mother whispered. "What you should have done 17 years ago," I said. "Choosing justice over comfort." The timer was set for 10 minutes. Enough time for final words, for last confessions, for the truth to sink in. But not enough time for escape. "You can't do this," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "There are innocent people here." "Innocent?" I laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. "Look around this room, Marcus. Show me one innocent person. Show me one person who didn't know, didn't suspect, didn't choose to look the other way." I thought about Elena in that moment, about the nurse who'd risked everything to help me escape. She'd warned me about dangerous truths, but she'd also given me the means to tell them. "You told the world I was mad," I said, looking directly at Father. "You had me declared insane, locked away, tortured, and left to die. All because I tried to tell the truth about what you were doing." Father was clutching his chest, his face gray with pain. The stress was too much for his damaged heart. "The children," he gasped. "The children you're talking about, they were already lost." already damaged. We just. You just what? I demanded. You just sold them to the highest bidder? You just decided their lives didn't matter. He collapsed then, his body finally giving out. Mother rushed to his side, but it was too late. The man who destroyed my life was dying, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no joy, no sense of completion. Just emptiness. The timer showed 5 minutes remaining. I could stop this, I said to the room, holding up the device. I could let you all go, let you live with the knowledge of what you've done. But you wouldn't learn, would you? You'd find a way to cover this up, to spin the story, to make yourselves the victims. Some of the guests were praying. Others were crying. A few were still trying to break down the doors. Please, Mother whispered. Juliet, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you? I asked. Are you sorry for what happened to me, or are you sorry you're going to die? She couldn't answer. How could she? I'd spent 10 years learning to tell the difference between genuine remorse and self-serving manipulation. 2 minutes remaining. I found myself thinking about the girl I'd been at 16, the one who'd believed in justice and truth and happy endings. She'd been so naive, so hopeful, so beautifully innocent. I mourned her in that moment, perhaps for the first time, but I also realized something else. She hadn't been wrong to believe in justice. She'd just been wrong about what justice looked like. 1 minute remaining. I looked around the room one last time, at the faces of the people who'd participated in or enabled my father's crimes. They were terrified, desperate, finally understanding what their choices had cost. Now let them see, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room, what madness truly looks like. The timer reached 0. But nothing happened. The room was silent except for the sound of panic breathing and Father's rattling death throes. Everyone stared at me, confused, terrified, waiting for the explosion that never came. Did you really think I was going to kill myself? I asked, my voice calm. Did you think I'd spent 17 years planning my revenge, only to die in the execution? I held up the device, showing them the timer that had been nothing more than a prop, a piece of theater designed to force them to confront their own mortality. The real revenge, I continued, is that you're all going to live. You're going to live with the knowledge of what you've done, what you've enabled, what you've ignored. And everyone else is going to know too. I gestured to the cameras I'd installed throughout the room, the ones that had been recording everything. The confessions, the panic, the truth that had finally been spoken. The recordings have already been uploaded to every major news outlet, every social media platform, every government database I could access. By morning, the world will know exactly what the Blackwood family has done, what you've all done. The doors opened then, unlocked by the same remote system I'd used to secure them. Police officers streamed in, led by Detective Sarah Chen, another person I'd carefully cultivated over the past year, someone who'd been investigating human trafficking cases and would understand the significance of what she was seeing. The evidence is all here, I told her, handing over files I'd compiled. Documents, recordings, financial records. Everything you need to prosecute not just my father's crimes, but the entire network that enabled them. As the guests were led away, as the investigation began, as the truth finally came to light, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 17 years, peace. Not the peace of revenge satisfied, but the peace of truth finally told. The peace of justice, delayed but not denied. Elena had been right about dangerous truths, but she'd also been wrong. Some truths are too dangerous to remain buried, too important to sacrifice for the comfort of the innocent. I walked out of that house for the second time in my life, but this time I wasn't being dragged away in chains. This time, I was walking away free. The newspapers would call it the Blackwood Massacre, even though no one died except Father. They'd dissect every aspect of the story, analyze every motive, debate every choice. Some would call me a hero. Others would call me a monster. I didn't care. I'd stopped caring about other people's opinions the day I was locked away for telling the truth. But I did care about one thing. As I walked away from that house, from that life, from that 17-year nightmare, I thought about the children my father had sold. The ones who'd never had a chance to grow up, to plan their revenge, to see their truth vindicated. I thought about Elena, who'd risked everything to help me escape, about the other patients at Thornfield, who were still trapped in that system of abuse and neglect. And I realized that my story wasn't over. Justice for the Blackwood family was just the beginning. The caged bird had finally learned to sing, and her song was going to burn the whole world down. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to our channel for more of this content coming your way.